like to take the opportunity to thank all of you for putting such an important event to celebrate the International Day for People of African Descent. More importantly, I want to thank the St. Lucia National Reparations Committee for all the hard work and continuing to keep the memories alive, continuing to remind us that we must never ever forget the journey that we have traveled, that we must never ever forget that while we have moved mountains, we are far, very far away from reaching the promised land. Ours is a journey of suffering, it's a journey of hardship, it's a journey that no other group of people have ever been through. Sadly, the systems that were put in place to keep us where they want us to be remain alive and well today. What I find quite astonishing, what I find quite perplexing, is why that over 400 years later, since the children of Africa were taken out of the continent, that we have been absolutely failed to undo the damage. It takes me then back to what I consider the seven pillars of how we have been kept where they want us to be. What I call sin number one is what they did to us with the mind. I often talk about the educational systems. Why is it that in 2022, we're still using colonial textbooks? Why haven't we changed the syllabuses so we can begin to speak the truth and nothing but the truth? How do we begin to make that turn, that we can begin to raise children that grow up knowing that as a person of African descent, be it a male or a female, you are the mother and father of humanity. You belong on the tallest pedestal. The question is, do our children know that? Are we teaching them the truth that you gave birth to humanity? Our textbooks, be it in the Caribbean, be it in Africa, remain and continue to teach colonial history the way they wanted us to learn it. I call it sin number one, lie number one. When we were told that we are inferior and that they are superior. You got to remember, before they came to Africa, they were not white. Before they came to Africa, we were not black. But when they came to Africa, they found some most amazing people, intelligent, totally indestructible people. And they wondered, how are we going to conquer such a people? So they set out to put a plan in place to make us, I like to say the superior beings, but I won't say that. They set out a system to make us feel inferior and make them feel superior. So yes, we went to school and they taught us about the different colors, red, green, yellow, black, white. But out of all those colors, they focused on two. They gave attributes to the color white. They gave attributes to the color black. Black was associated with everything bad and undesirable, and white was associated with everything beautiful and desirable. Then they said, let's go to church. And they told us about a place called heaven. And they told us there were beings called angels who are always beautiful and they do good things and that we should all aspire to become angels. And by the way, we are white like the angels, even though they don't look like that white piece of paper that they just told us about in school. Never mind what we taught you in school about the color white. Just know that we are white like the angels. And we said, okay, never questioned it. Blatant lie. And then said, oh, by the way, there's a place called hell. There is a devil there who does all the horrible things and you must shy away from the devil. And by the way, that devil is black, like you. You may not look like that black sheet of paper we told you about in school, but never mind that. You're black like the devil. And we said, okay, another lie. Centuries of this lie. To this day, we have never called it out. I've never seen a human being who looks white like the color white. So why is it that we continue to call them white? And keep in mind, when we call them white, we're equating them to the angels. And we're worshiping the angels. We're worshiping Jesus Christ. We're worshiping them. Subliminal messages. Subliminal messages that continue to this very day. Subliminal messages that make it difficult. That quite often when we as people of color are in the same room with those that they call themselves white when they're not white, we are automatically defeated. Somehow we can't seem to challenge them. Somehow we can't seem to call them out. Somehow whatever they say, we automatically assume is good and better. Line number one, the question I have for you, my brothers and sisters, when are we going to call a spade a spade? It is a simple concept with profound implications. Some of you may remember the little experiment that was done with the children, given black dolls and white dolls, and the children were both black and white. And when asked to pick what doll they wanted, of course, all the little white girls chose white dolls. That's understandable. But when it came to the little black girls, they all chose white dolls. And when asked why, they said, because the black dolls are ugly. Now, no self-respecting mother, no self-respecting aunt, uncle, father would have taken a 5-year-old and sat them down and said, oh, the way you look is ugly. Those kids, nobody had ever told them that the way they look is ugly, but there are subliminal messages all around them that depict that the way you look is undesirable. It all goes back to line number one. It all goes back to the system that was put in place to implement white supremacy. The question I have for you all today is, how long is this lie going to continue? How long are we going to continue to follow this system that they put in place, starting in Africa, to defeat us where it matters the most, the mind? How long is it going to take for each and every one of us to have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror? How long? It's not good enough that United Nations has to tell us, decade of people of African descent, come on now, I don't need anybody to tell me that if I know who I am. When is the decade of people of whatever the color they are? I don't want to call them white because they are not white. How long, my brothers and sisters, are we going to continue to be lied to have them dictate who we are, tell us how we should behave and think? How long will we continue to be stupid? We're the mothers and fathers of humanity. We belong on the tallest pedestal. And we must understand that those who put us where we are today, no matter where you find us as people of African descent, they will not pave the way for us to take our rightful place. And for us to win this war against white supremacy, it's going to take all of us understanding our history, understanding what they are doing to us to keep us where they want us to be, understand the geopolitics of this world. Look at the World Bank. Look at the loans that are given to countries that are made up of people of color, people of African descent. World Bank is giving these frivolous, criminal loans to Africans and Caribbean countries because their sheer survival is based on our failures. Look at the world trade policies that are skewed against countries like in the Caribbean and in Africa. It's all by design. So we can forever be subservient. We can ever be the consumers of their products. And when it comes to Africa, our own natural resources that are being siphoned out of Africa, value added outside, and back to us again, just consumers. Let's understand the multinationals that never left the islands, never left Africa when we were given quote unquote, which is fake, because we are not free. We were given fake independence, but economic liberation was denied from us to this day. And it is with us understanding those systems, with us understanding that for Africa to succeed, for Africa and her children, no matter where you find them, to succeed, Africa must be free. And for Africa to be free, Africa must understand that we must speak with one voice. Truly speak with one voice. Africa needs a single African currency. Africa needs its own monetary policy. Africa needs its own stock exchange. Africa needs its own military. Africa must have its own trade policy. Yes, we have the African continent of free trade area, but this implementation is going to be a monster. Its implementation is going to be marred with all kinds of infiltrations to make sure that it doesn't succeed. They never thought the African heads of states would come together and agree on something. This was the first. And now that they were able to come together and agree, which was the first, and they're making sure that its implementation is not going to be a success. Unless we come together as a people, unless we understand that we don't have to love each other, but when it comes to issues pertaining to us, we must stick together like super glue, just like others have done. Having resided in the United States for many years, when you ask for the voices of the Chinese diaspora loud and clear, ask for the voices of the Jews, ask for the voices of the Irish, the Indian diaspora, all loud and clear, they stick together when it comes to issues pertaining to their survival. Something that we, as people of African descent, have failed to do. The question then becomes, my brothers and sisters, as we celebrate this decade of people of Africa, where is your mind? How do you feel about who you are? Are you comfortable with our circumstances as a people? On an individual basis, what have you done to play your part? That's why I'm so proud of the St. Lucia National Reparations Committee. You continue to sound that clarion call. You continue to remind us once again that we deserve to have reparations. We never invaded anybody. The Japanese, look at them. Look at Pearl Harbor. They got their reparations. The Jews, they got their reparations. But when it comes to us, people of African descent, the standards change. What's wrong with you, people of African descent? You don't need reparations. You ought to be glad that we came to invade Africa. As we speak today, my brothers and sisters, every former colonizer, they have remains of our ancestors, their heads in jars in their basements throughout Europe. And they refuse to give them back to us. And you know why? They refused to give them back to us because their heads were classified as trophies of conquest. Trophies of conquest, right next to the head of a lion. And we, people of African descent, are doing nothing about it. How long do you think the finger of a British soldier lasts in Kenya? How long do you think a toe of a German soldier lasts in Namibia? Not even an hour. They would storm into those countries, kill thousands of people just to recover that tiny little body part. But as we speak today, we are not accusing them of murder. We are simply asking for the remains of our ancestors so we can give them proper burial. You see, they don't want that. Because if we give them proper burial, then there's going to be a gravesite, which is a monument that we can take our children and tell them the history of this ancestor and what they did and the uprising and the resistance that they stood up with nothing and fought the British and won, and fought the Germans and fought the Italians and fought the Portuguese and fought all of them. They don't want that history. They don't want those monuments. So yes, while we celebrate the United Nations International Day for People of African Descent, I am saying to the United Nations, you are the institution that's supposed to fight human rights abuses all over the world. What have you done about this gross abuse of Africa? What have you done to stop the carnage? And yet the same people with the skeletons and the body parts still in their basements, they come to us and they want to talk to us about human rights. Hello, United Nations, where are you? So please don't give us these nonsense proclamations. We want real issues dealt with. We want the World Bank to stop giving these frivolous loans to the Caribbean nations, to the African nations, nations that have never defaulted on their loan repayment. Why are they getting 10, 15, 20% interest rates? Answer that question, United Nations. That is your job. Of course, you're not going to answer because you're part of the problem. Nations that have abided by the rule of law. Nations whose economies have completely collapsed outside Africa, they get better interest rates than African nations and Caribbean nations that have never defaulted on their loans, whose economies have never crashed. United Nations, as we celebrate International Day for People of African Descent, what are you doing about these blatant abuses? That's your job. So yes, we appreciate the day and the proclamation, but that's not good enough, and stop playing games with us. We want real facts to be addressed, starting with the remains of our ancestors. We want them back. And until we get those simple, blatant abuses addressed, keep your little frivolous proclamations. We don't need them. We want real results. We are asking United Nations to play its part and do the right thing. And stop playing with us. We don't have time for those games anymore. We are done. So yes, I know we have some United Nations representatives, and please take that message over. We want to start with our remains being declassified as human beings and not as trophies of conquest. How embarrassing is that? Yes, happy International Day for People of African Descent. We're only asking that United Nations do what is right, do what is just, do what is fair, and above all, do what you were constituted to do. Protect and defend human rights, starting with correcting the murders of our ancestors and bringing their remains back home for proper burial. Happy International Day for People of African Descent. I thank you.